Mark chapter 5, Jesus has demons into a herd of pigs. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of Gerasenia. So when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. And this man lived in barrel caves and could no longer be restrained. Even with a chain, whenever he put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him, and day and night he wandering among the barrel caves in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus was still distant away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him with a shriek, and he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of Man, Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." And then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And that he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send him to some distant place. And there happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. Let us enter into them." So although we can't be sure why demon possession occurs, we know that evil spirits can use the human body and destroy people's relationships with God and likeness to Him. Even today, demons are dangerous, powerful, and destructive. While it's important to recognize their evil activity, we should avoid any curiosity about or involvement with demonic forces or their cult. In Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10, verse 12, it says, "If we resist the devil, his influences, he will flee from us." In James chapter 4, verse 7, too. So go back to Deuteronomy. (18:10). For example, never sacrifice your son and daughter as a burnt offering, and do not let your people practice fortune telling, or use sorcery, or interpret omens, or engage in witchcraft, or cast spells, or function as mediums or psychics, or call forth the spirits of the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. It is because the other nations have done this surrounding you, things that the Lord your God will drive them out ahead of you. But you must be blameless before the Lord your God. The nations you are about to displace consult sorcerers and fortune tellers. But the Lord your God forbids you to do such things like the nations around you are surrounded by. The demons screamed at Jesus because, "Why are you interfering with me?" It was a shriek of fear, defense, and rebellion against God. No one today would like to admit to being demon possessed, but many in our society, like demons, are screaming at God, the church, and Christian values. "Why are you interfering with me? Get out of my life." When people reject Jesus Christ and His authority, they put themselves on the side of the demons and are heading in the same direction. Every person must ask, will I choose anonymity and self-will leading to destruction, or my ways, or will I choose Christ's loving way, loving leadership over my life, giving my forgiveness, healing from sin, cleansing, and true freedom? The answer has eternal implications. The evil spirit said its name Legion. A legion was the largest unit of the Roman army, consisting of 3,000, 6,000 soldiers. This man was possessed by many demons. And then Mark, the gospel offering, highlights the supernatural struggle between Jesus and Satan. The demon's goal was to control or to destroy the humans they inhabited. Jesus' goal was to give people freedom from sin and Satan's control. The demons knew they had no power over Jesus Christ, so they simply begged not to be sent to some distant place, the bottomless pit in Luke chapter 8, verse 31. Jesus granted a request to enter into the herd of pigs in Mark chapter 5:14, but he ended their destructive work in people. Perhaps let the demons destroy the pigs to demonstrate his own superiority over a very powerful yet destructive force. He could have sent the demons to hell, but he did not, because his time for judgment had not yet come. In the end, he did not, because that time for judgment had not come, and the devil and all his demons and who will follow him will be sent to eternal fire. Matthew chapter 25, verse 41. And he had replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside." Now going to Mark chapter 5 verse 13. So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of them and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunging down the steep hills into the lake and drowning in the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened, and the crowds gathered around Jesus, and they saw that the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, he was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. And those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus said, "No, go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done good in your life, and how merciful he has been." And so the man started off to visit the 10 towns of the region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed when he told them. So according to the Old Testament, the pigs were unclean animals. This meant that they could not be eaten or even touched by a Jew. This incident took place southeast of Sea of Galilee in the region of Gentile region, which explains how I heard the pigs could be involved in. And after such a wonderful miracle of saving a man's life, why did the people want Jesus to leave? They were undoubtedly afraid of his supernatural power. They could not contain or appease him like they could their pagan gods. They may have also feared that Jesus would continue to destroy their pigs, which were their livelihood. Evidently, they cared nothing for the needs of the man. They would rather give up Jesus than lose the source of income and security. Mark chapter 5, verse 21, Jesus heals a bleeding woman and restores a girl to life. So Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. And then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell out at his feet and pleading furiously with him. "My little girl is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her. Heal her so she can live." And Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years in constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them. But she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him and through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, "If I can touch his robe, I would be healed." Immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she would have been healed of her terrible condition. And then Jesus realized at once that the healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" The disciple said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing around you. "How can you ask who touched me?" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. And then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith had made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." While he was still speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, and they told him, "Your daughter is dead. There is no use troubling the teacher now." But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith." Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to him of the synagogue, the leader, Jesus saw much of the commotion and weeping and wailing, and he went inside and asked, "Why all the commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead, she's only asleep." And the crowd laughed at him. But he made them all leave and took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. Holding her hand, he said to her, whatever that word is, Talitha something, cum, which means, "Little girl, get up." And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around, and they were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone what would happen, and then he told them to give her something to eat. Here we go. Well, that button and the notifications.
This passage tells the story of Jairus and his daughter from Mark 5, verse 21 to 43, Matthew 9, 18 to 26, and Luke 8, 40 to 56. It highlights Jairus' faith in Jesus despite obstacles and delays, showing how trust in God can overcome fear and doubt. Key points from the passage. 1. Jesus delayed, but God's timing is perfect. While Jesus was on his way to heal Jairus' daughter, he stopped to heal the woman with the issue of blood. This delay must have made Jairus anxious. His worst fears came true when news arrived that his daughter had died. Despite this, Jesus encouraged him to stay confident and keep faith. 2. Crowds and mourners were faithless. When Jesus arrived at Jairus' house, the mourners laughed at him for saying the girl was only asleep. This shows how people often doubt God's power, but Jesus works beyond human understanding. He only allowed a few disciples and the girl's parents to witness the miracle, showing that faith matters. 3. Jesus' words to Jairus, Mark 5:36. Don't be afraid, just have faith. This reminds us that fear and faith cannot coexist. Trusting in God keeps hope alive. Sometimes what seems lost or impossible is restored when we put our trust in God. Lessons from Jairus' life: humbled himself to seek Jesus' help, even though he was a synagogue leader. Responded quickly to Jesus' instructions. Faith isn't about public opinion. He had to trust Jesus even when people laughed. Vital statistics: location, Capernaum. Occupation, synagogue leader. Relative, daughter, unnamed. Key verse: don't be afraid, just have faith. Mark 5:36. Connection to the woman with the issue of blood. The passage also references the woman who had suffered for 12 years before being healed. Her story contrasts with the doubtful crowds. She had faith that just touching Jesus' robe would heal her. Jesus not only healed her, but affirmed her faith, showing the difference between true faith and skepticism. Takeaway for us: faith requires patience. Delays don't mean God has forgotten us. Public opinion doesn't define God's power. Even when people doubt, he is still at work. Fear is the enemy of faith. Jesus calls us to trust him even in hopeless situations. Would you like to explore a deeper connection between this story and another biblical lesson?
Acts chapter 9 verse 17. D525. Lev 15 25 50. A win-win communal power. They could not control, contain, or appease him could their pagan gods. They may have also feared that Jesus would one continue to destroy fight pigs, which were their livelihood, evidently. They cared nothing for the needs of the man. They would rather give up Shunhan love their source of income and security. Vouched by Gain the Hawa. 5:19-20. This man had been demon-possessed, but became a live-in BD example of Jesus' power. He wanted to go with Jesus, but Jesus told him to go home and share his story with his friends. If you have experiences, 2541, Jesus' power in your life, are you, like this man, enthusiastically sharing the good news with those around you? Just as we would tell others about a doctor who cured a physical disease, we should tell them Abu Christ, who cures our sin and sets us free. Why did the once arrayed of his? Heard 5:19. Jesus told this man to tell his friends about the miraculous healing most of the time. Jesus would urge those he had healed to keep quiet. Why the difference? 1. The demon-possessed man had been alone and unable to speak. Telling others what Jesus did for him would prove that he had been healed, and give him a chance to be accepted back into society, find work, and be reunited with his friends and family. 2. This was mainly a Gentile and pagan area, So Jesus was not expecting great crowds to follow him, or religious leaders to hinder him. 3. By sending the man away with this good news, Jesus was expanding his ministry to people who were not Jews. This man was the first missionary to the Gentiles. Gerasa. 520. These 10 towns were located southeast of the Sea of Galilee. 10 cities, each with its own independent government, formed an alliance for protection and for increased trade opportunities. These cities had been settled several centuries before this time by Greek traders and immigrants. Although Jews also lived in the area, they were in the minority. Many people from the 10 towns followed Jesus. Matthew chapter 4 verse 25. 522. Jesus went back across the Sea of Galilee, probably landing at Capernaum. Jairus was the elected leader of the local synagogue there, responsible for supervising worship, running the weekly school, and caring for the building. Many synagogue leaders had close ties to the Pharisees, so it is likely that some of them had been pressured not to support Jesus. For Jairus to bow before Jesus was a significant end.
Six. Jesus rejected at Nazareth. Jesus left that part of the country and returned with his disciples to Nazareth, his hometown. The next Sabbath, he began teaching in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. They asked, "Where did he get all this wisdom and the power to perform such miracles?" Then they scoffed. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. And his sisters live right here among us." They were deeply offended and refused to believe in him. Then Jesus told them, "A prophet is honored everywhere except in his own hometown and among his relatives and his own family." And because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any miracles among them except to place his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Jesus sends out the 12 disciples. Then Jesus went from village to village teaching the people, and he called his 12 disciples together and began sending them out 2 by 2, giving them authority to cast out evil spirits. He told them to take nothing for their journey except a walking stick. No food, no traveler's bag, no money. He allowed them to wear sandals, but not to take a change of clothes. "Wherever you go," he said, "stay in the same house until you leave town. But if any place refuses to welcome you or listen to you, shake its dust from your feet as you leave to show that you have abandoned those people to their fate." So the disciples went out, telling everyone they met to repent of their sins and turn to God. And they cast out many demons and healed many sick people, anointing them with olive oil. The death of John the Baptist. Herod Antipas, the king, soon heard about Jesus because everyone was talking about him. Some were saying, "This must be John the Baptist raised from the dead. That is why he can do such miracles." Others said, "He's the prophet Elijah." Still others said, "He's a prophet like the other great prophets of the past." When Herod heard about Jesus, he said, "John, the man I beheaded, has come back from the dead." For Herod had sent soldiers to arrest and imprison John as a favor to Herodias. She had been his brother Philip's wife, but Herod had married her. John had been telling Herod, "It is against God's law for you to marry your brother's wife." So Herodias bore a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. But without Herod's approval, she was powerless. For Herod respected John, and knowing that he was a good and holy man, he protected him. Herod was greatly disturbed whenever he talked with John, but even so, he liked to listen to him. Herodias' chance finally came on Herod's birthday. He gave a party for his high government officials, army officers, and the leading citizens of Galilee. Then his daughter, also named Herodias, came in and performed a dance that greatly pleased Herod and his guests. "Ask me for anything you like," the king said to the girl, "and I will give it to you." He even vowed, "I will give you whatever you ask, up to half my kingdom." She went out and asked her mother, "What should I ask for?" Her mother told her, "Ask for the head of John the Baptist." So the girl hurried back to the king and told him, "I want the head of John the Baptist right now on a tray." Then the king deeply regretted what he had said. But because of the vows he had made in front of his guest, he couldn't refuse her. So he immediately sent an executioner to the prison to cut off John's head and bring it to him. The soldier beheaded John in the prison, brought his head on a tray, and gave it to the girl, who took it to her mother. When John's disciples heard what had happened, they came to get his body and buried it in a tomb. Jesus feeds 5,000. The apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told him all they had done and taught. Then Jesus said, "Let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while." He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. So they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. But many people recognized them and saw them leaving. And people from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. Late in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the nearby farms and villages and buy something to eat." But Jesus said, "You feed them." "With what?" they asked. "We'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for all these people." "How much bread do you have?" he asked. "Go and find out." They came back and reported, "We have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." Then Jesus told the disciples to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of 50 or 100. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up toward heaven and blessed them. Then breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread to the disciples so they could distribute it to the people. He also divided the fish for everyone to share. They all ate as much as they wanted, and afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. A total of 5,000 men and their families were fed. Jesus walks on water. Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and head across the lake to Bethsaida, while he sent the people home. After telling everyone goodbye, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Late that night, the disciples were in their boat in the middle of the lake, and Jesus was alone on land. He saw that they were in serious trouble, rowing hard and struggling against the wind and waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water. He intended to go past them, but when they saw him walking on the water, they cried out in terror, thinking he was a ghost. They were all terrified when they saw him, but Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I am here." Then he climbed into the boat and the wind stopped. They were totally amazed, for they still didn't understand the significance of the miracle of the loaves. Their hearts were too hard to take it in. After they had crossed the lake, they landed at Gennesaret. They brought the boat to shore and climbed out. The people recognized Jesus at once, and they ran throughout the whole area carrying sick people on mats to wherever they heard he was. Wherever he went, in villages, cities, or the countryside, they brought the sick out to the marketplaces. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, and all who touched him were healed. 7. Jesus teaches about inner purity. One day, some Pharisees and teachers of religious law arrived from Jerusalem to see Jesus. They noticed that some of his disciples failed to follow the Jewish ritual of hand washing before eating.
Wait. Wait.
The next raid, look at your problem from Jesus' point. Just have faith as you trust in and rely on him. Rioting were customary when a person died. Was the ultimate disgrace and sign of disro women, made mourning a profession and son's family to weep over the body. On the day be carried through the streets, followed RS and friends. Get at Jesus when he said, the child isn't girl was dead, but Jesus used the image of Dishon was temporary in that she would abuse in order to teach an important lesson trust in him. Today, most of the world when you are belittled for expressing faith in IFE, remember that unbelievers don't see a clear statement about life after death. Mediterranean Sea, Galilee, Capernaum, Bethsaida, Sea of Nazareth, Jerusalem, Jordan River, Dead Sea, 20 milliliters, 2 Cam 541-42. Jesus not only demonstrated great power but also showed tremendous compassion. Jesus' power over evil spirits, nature, and death was motivated by compassion for a demon-possessed man who lived among tombs, a diseased woman, and the family of a dead girl. The rabbis of the day considered such people unclean, and polite society avoided them. But Jesus reached out and helped them. When we follow Jesus and join his new community, we must also take up his cause. We, too, are to help people in trouble and those who need aid. 543 Jesus told the girl's parents not to spread the news of the miracle. He wanted the facts to speak for themselves, and the time was not yet right for a major confrontation with the religious leaders. Jesus still had much to accomplish, and he didn't want people following him just to see his miracles. 6-4 Jesus said that a prophet is never honored in his hometown. But that doesn't make such a person's work any less important. Many leaders and workers for God face the same disrespect at home that Jesus did. A person doesn't need to be respected or honored to be useful to God. If your friends, neighbors, or family don't respect your Christian work, pray that their rejection will encourage your faith and that this will motivate you to keep serving God with all your heart. 6-5 Jesus could have done greater miracles in Nazareth, but he chose not to because of the people's pride and unbelief. The miracles he did had little effect on the people because they did not accept his message or believe that he was from God. Therefore, Jesus looked elsewhere, seeking those who would respond to his miracles and message. We cannot control the way others react to Jesus. Despite strong evidence for the truth of his claims, some still won't believe in him. We should ask God to lead us to those who are open to hearing about Jesus. 6-7 The disciples were sent out in pairs. Individually they could have reached more areas of the country, but this was not Jesus' plan, and it was in keeping with the Jewish practice of having two witnesses. Deuteronomy 17-6. Going out by twos had these advantages. 1. They could strengthen and encourage each other. 2. They could provide comfort in rejection. 3. They could sharpen each other's discernment, and fewer mistakes would be made. 4. They could stir each other to action as a counter to idleness or indifference. Our strength comes from God, but he meets many of our needs through our teamwork with others. As you serve Jesus, don't try to go it alone. 6:8-9 Mark recorded that the disciples were instructed to take no thing with them except walking sticks, while Matthew and Luke recorded that Jesus told them not to take walking sticks. One explanation is that Matthew and Luke were referring to a club used for